Joseph Fidler. Joe Walsh is an American musician, singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, record producer, and actor. He has previously been a member of two commercially successful bands, Barnstorm and the Eagles. In the late 1960s, he was also a member of the critically acclaimed James Gang. He has also experienced success both as a solo artist and prolific session musician. Walsh is ranked at the number 54 spot in the Rolling Stone magazine's 100 Greatest Guitarists of All Time. Walsh was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of the Eagles in 1998, the first year they were nominated. The guitar solo on the track Hotel California by Walsh and Don Felder was, in 1998 by Guitarist magazine, selected as the best guitar solo of all time, and again in 1998 by Guitar magazine at 8th of the top 100 guitar solos. Walsh has been praised by many of the best rock guitarists, including Led Zeppelin's former guitarist, Jimmy Page, who praised Walsh by saying he has a tremendous feel for the instrument. "I've loved his style since the early James Gang." Cream's former guitarist, Eric Clapton, said that he's one of the best guitarists to surface in some time. "I don't listen to many records, but I listen to his." The Who's guitarist Pete Townshend commented that Joe Walsh is a fluid and intelligent player. "There are not many like that around." Although known primarily as a guitarist, Walsh also plays many other instruments and sings. Early life and education. Joseph Fidler Walsh was born in Wichita, Kansas. His mother was a classically trained pianist of Scottish and German ancestry, and Walsh was adopted by his stepfather at the age of 5 after his biological father was killed in a plane crash. In the 1950s it was common practice for Social Security, school registration, and health records for children to take the name of their stepfather, but Walsh's birth father's last name was Fidler, so he took that as his middle name. Walsh and his family lived in Columbus, Ohio, for a number of years during his youth. When Walsh was 12 years old, his family moved to New York City. Later, Walsh moved to Montclair, New Jersey, and attended Montclair High School, where he played oboe in the school band. Inspired by the success of the Beatles, he replaced Bruce Hoffman as the bass player in the locally popular group The Nomads in Montclair, beginning his career as a rock musician. After high school, Walsh attended Kent State University, where he spent time in various bands playing around the Cleveland area, including the Measles. The Measles recorded for Super K Productions' Ohio Express, "I Find I Think of You," and "It's True," and "Maybe." After one term, he dropped out of university to pursue his musical career. 1960s and 1970s. In January 1968 Walsh replaced Glenn Schwartz as the lead guitarist for the James Gang, a five-piece American band that rapidly became a power trio after their lead vocalist and keyboardist quit. They released their first album, Your Album, in 1969. Afterwards, Tom Criss left the band and was replaced by Dale Peters, creating the most successful incarnation of the James Gang. Walsh proved to be the band's star attraction, noted for his innovative rhythm playing and creative guitar riffs. In particular, he was known for hot wiring the pickups on his electric guitars to create his trademark attack sound. The James Gang had several minor hits and became an early album-oriented rock staple for the next 2 years. Shortly before the release of James Gang Rides Again, the James Gang opened a show for the legendary rock band, The Who in Pittsburgh. Their guitarist Pete Townshend caught the James Gang before they left and was impressed enough to invite them on The Who's subsequent European tour. When Walsh was asked about this, he said that, "Pete's a very melodic player and so am I. He told me that he appreciated my playing. I was flattered beyond belief because I didn't think I was that good." The James Gang's next 2 albums, James Gang Rides Again and Thirds, produced such classics as Funk No. 49 and Walk Away. The album James Gang Live at Carnegie Hall was Walsh's last album with them, as he became dissatisfied with the band's limitations. In November 1971, he left and formed the group Barnstorm, although all of their albums credited Walsh as a solo artist. Walsh and Barnstorm released their debut album, the eponymous Barnstorm, in October 1972. The album was a critical success, but had only moderate commercial success. The follow-up The Smoker You Drink, The Player You Get, released in June 1973, was marketed under Walsh's name and was their commercial breakthrough, peaking at number 6 on the US Billboard chart. The first and leading single, Rocky Mountain Way, received heavy airplay and reached number 23 on the US Top 40 chart. In 1974, Barnstorm disbanded and Walsh continued as a solo artist. In 1974, Walsh produced Dan Fogelberg's Souvenirs album and played the guitar, electric guitar, 12-string guitar, art bass and provided backing vocals. He also contacted Graham Nash to sing harmony vocals on Part of the Plan, which helped send the album to number 17 on the 1975 Billboard album chart. In late 1974, Walsh played slide guitar on the former Barnstorm bandmate, Joe Vitale's debut solo album Rollercoaster Weekend. In December 1974, Walsh released an official solo album, So What, and in March 1976, a live set, You Can't Argue with a Sick Mind. These would be his last solo albums until 1978. In 1975, Walsh was invited to move to England and join Humble Pie, but he decided to decline the offer, and in late 1975 he joined the Eagles as Bernie Leadon's replacement. There was some initial concern as to Walsh's ability to fit in with the band, as he was considered too wild for the Eagles, especially by their drummer and co-lead vocalist, Don Henley. His addition worked out to be a success, steering the band toward a harder-edged sound and away from their early country-style work. He was featured prominently on their multi-million-selling album Hotel California, co-writing the top 20 hit Life in the Fast Lane with Don Henley and Glenn Frey. As the Eagles struggled to record the follow-up to Hotel California, Walsh reignited his solo career with a well-received album, But Seriously, Folks. In May 1978, which featured his hit comical depiction of rock stardom, Life's Been Good. It peaked at number 12 on the US Billboard Hot 100, and remains to date his biggest solo hit. Walsh also contributed In the City to the Warriors soundtrack in 1979, a song penned and sung by Walsh that was later re-recorded for the Eagles' studio album, The Long Run, 1980s and 1990s. Following the breakup of the Eagles in July 1980, Walsh continued to release solo albums throughout the 1980s, but sales did not meet the same level of his earlier successes. He also worked with other bands. In 1981, Walsh and former Barnstorm bandmate, Joe Vitale, went to work on old friend John Entwistle's fifth solo album Too Late the Hero, whenever they were free to work on it. The album turned out to become John Entwistle's best-charting solo album, with hit singles Talk Dirty, and Too Late the Hero. In late 1984, Walsh was contacted by Australian musician Paul Christie, the former bassist in Mondo Rock, who invited him to come to Australia to perform with the Party Boys, an all-star group with a floating membership of well-known Australian rock musicians, which included the acclaimed guitarist Kevin Bowreach, with whom Walsh became good friends. Walsh accepted and performed with the Party Boys on their late 1984-early 1985 Australian tour, appearing on their live album, You Need Professional Help. He remained in Australia for some time after the tour, putting together the short-lived touring group Creatures from America, with Waddy Wachtel, Rick Roses and Australian drummer Richard Harvey. Walsh returned to the United States to work, but returned to Australia in 1989 to tour with another incarnation of the Party Boys. Walsh also toured with Ringo Starr in 1989, alternating a handful of his best-known songs with Ringo's tunes, as did all the members of the All-Star Band. In 1989, Walsh recorded a MTV Unplugged with the R&B musician Dr. John. Also in 1989, Walsh filmed a live concert from the Wilton Theatre in Los Angeles with Etta James and Albert Collins. Jazz Visions, Jump the Blues Away. While producing their homegrown album in 1989, Walsh briefly joined New Zealand reggae band Herbs. Although he had left by the time of its 1990 release, he still appears as lead vocalist on two tracks, Up All Night, and It's Alright. The album includes the first recording of his Ordinary Average Guys, which subsequently became a solo hit for Walsh's Ordinary Average Guy. In late 1990, Walsh was part of a band called The Best, along with keyboardist Keith Emerson, bassist John Entwistle, guitarist Jeff "Skunk" Baxter and drummer Simon Phillips. The band performed several shows in Hawaii and Japan, with a live video resulting. In 1994, Walsh reunited with the Eagles for a highly successful reunion tour and live album, Hell Freezes Over. Walsh has toured regularly with the Eagles since then, and the group released their first new studio album in 28 years, Long Road Out of Eden, in 2007. In 1995, Walsh sang the U.S. national anthem at the beginning of Game 5 of the World Series. 2000s and 2010s, in June 2004, Walsh performed at Eric Clapton's Crossroads Guitar Festival in Dallas, Texas. He was also featured in September 2004 at the Strat Pack, a concert held in London, England to mark the 50th anniversary of the Fender Stratocaster guitar. In 2006, Walsh reunited with Jim Fox and Dale Peters of the James Gang for new recordings and a 15-date summer reunion tour. The tour lasted into the fall. In 2008, Walsh appeared on the Carvin's 60th anniversary celebration DVD as a celebrity endorser. In the recorded interview, he highly praised Carvin guitars and claims that the bridge design is just like the first Les Paul models. "I can't even get Gibson to reissue it." Walsh's song One Day at a Time, released in 2012, details his struggles with alcohol and drug abuse earlier in his career. The song appeared on Walsh's album Analog Man, which was released on June 5, 2012. The album was co-produced by Jeff Lynne, with Tommy Lee James co-writing some of the album's tracks. Kent State University awarded Walsh an honorary degree in music in December 2001. In May 2012, the Berklee College of Music awarded Walsh, along with other members of the Eagles, an honorary doctorate for his accomplishments in the field of music. Notable appearances. Walsh has produced albums for artists such as Dan Fogelberg and Ringo Starr. He was a background musician on Eagles bandmate Don Henley's 1982 hit Dirty Laundry. Walsh played guitar throughout Who bassist John Entwistle's 1981 solo album Too Late the Hero. Walsh has also contributed to albums by America, REO Speedwagon, Andy Gibb, Wilson Phillips, Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Steve Winwood, and on the Richard Marx hit Don't Mean Nothing. Walsh was a regular guest DJ on the Los Angeles radio station, KLOS, during the mid-1980s. They had a Saturday evening feature, with celebrity guest hosts taking over the mic. He was also a frequent guest and guest host of Detroit and Chicago radio personality Steve Dahl. On-screen Walsh has appeared in The Blues Brothers, RoboCop, Promised Land, The Drew Carey Show, Duckman, MAD-TV, Rock the Cradle and Zachariah. In October 2004, Walsh undertook speaking engagements in New Zealand to warn against the dangers of substance abuse. He said the visit was a thank you to people who took him to Otatara when he toured New Zealand with reggae band Herbs while under heavy alcohol and cocaine addictions in 1989, an experience he has cited as the beginning of a long journey back to health. At Otatara in 2004, Walsh said, "This is a special place, and it is very special to me. It was here on a visit many years ago, up on the hills, that I had a moment of clarity. I don't understand it, but I reconnected with my soul, and I remembered who I used to be. I admitted I had problems and I had to do something about it. It was the beginning of my recovery from my addiction to alcohol and drugs, and when I got back to America it gave me the courage to seek help." On February 12, 2012, Walsh appeared on stage with Paul McCartney, Bruce Springsteen, Dave Grohl, and McCartney's band at the Staples Center in Los Angeles to close out the Grammy Awards show. Walsh also appeared on the 60th episode of Live from Daryl's House with Daryl Hall, which premiered on November 15, 2012. On February 9, 2014, Walsh was featured in several songs on the CBS special The Night That Changed America, a Grammy salute to the Beatles. Charity causes. Walsh is active in charity work and has performed in a number of concerts to raise money for charitable causes. He has also been a personal contributor to a number of charity causes including halfway houses for displaced adult women in Wichita, Kansas. Walsh funded the first talent-based scholarship at Kent State University in 2008. Influences. Walsh cites influences including Jimi Hendrix, B.B. King, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Eric Clapton, The Rolling Stones, The Beach Boys, Jeff Beck, The Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Manfred Mann, and The Faces. In turn he has influenced Dan Fogelberg, Maroon 5, Kenny Chesney, Johnny Lang, The Fabulous Thunderbirds, and George Thorogood. Duane Allman of the Allman Brothers had also taught Walsh how to play the slide guitar. Personal life. Joe Walsh has been married 5 times. He was married briefly to Margie Walsh in the 1960s, to Stephanie Walsh from 1971 to 1978, to Juanita Boyer from 1980 to 1988 and to Denise Driscoll from 1999 to 2006. Walsh married Marjorie Bark in Los Angeles on December 13, 2008. Walsh's daughter Lucy Walsh is also a musician who has worked with Ashlee Simpson and others. She released her debut solo album, Lost in the Lights, in spring 2007. Walsh's eldest daughter, Emma Chrisson, was born in 1971 and died in 1974 at only 3 years old as a result of injuries suffered in an automobile accident on her way to nursery school. Her story inspired the track Song for Emma on Walsh's first official solo album So What, released later that year. In her memory, he had a fountain and memorial plaque placed in a park in which she played, North Boulder Park in Boulder, Colorado. He has said that the album name was a result of Emma's death, that nothing else seemed meaningful or important in the months that followed. The strain would eventually contribute to Walsh's divorce from his second wife Stephanie. While touring with singer Stevie Nicks in 1984, Walsh took Nicks to the park's fountain. Nicks subsequently immortalized this story in her song Has Anyone Ever Written Anything for You? On her 1985 album Rock a Little. When discussing their relationship, Nicks stated in a 2007 interview with the UK's The Daily Telegraph that Walsh had been the great love of her life. Walsh admits to struggling with alcohol and drug addictions for most of his career. However, he has been in recovery since 1995. Walsh related the story that in 1994 he woke up after blacking out on an airplane to Paris, France. When he arrived, he had his passport, but did not remember getting on the plane. That was his turning point and he has been sober ever since. While living in New York City, Walsh began a lifelong interest in amateur radio. Walsh holds an amateur extra-class amateur radio license, and his station call sign is WB6ACU. In 2006 he donated an autographed guitar to the ARRL in Newington, Connecticut, for its charity auction. He has also been involved with the group's Big Project, which brings amateur radio into schools. Walsh has included Morse code messages in his albums on 2 occasions, once on the album Barnstorm, and later on Songs for a Dying Planet. Running for Congress, Walsh had often joked about running for office, announcing a mock presidential campaign in 1980 and a vice presidential campaign in 1992. Walsh ran for President of the United States in 1980, promising to make Life's Been Good the new national anthem if he won, and ran on a platform of free gas for everyone. Though Walsh was not old enough to actually assume the office, he said that he wanted to raise public awareness of the election. In 1992 Walsh ran for vice president with Reverend Goat Carson under the slogan We Want Our Money Back. However, in an interview to promote his album Analog Man in 2012, Walsh revealed he was considering a serious bid for political office. "I think I would run seriously, and I think I would run for Congress," Walsh told Wash in Washington, D.C. "The root of the problem is that Congress is so dysfunctional. We're dead in the water until Congress gets to work and passes some new legislation to change things." Instruments: Jimmy Page's Sunburst 1959 Gibson Les Paul, better known as his number 1, was originally owned by Joe Walsh and was sold to Page in 1969. In 1970, Walsh gave a 1959 Gretsch 6120 to The Who's lead guitarist Pete Townshend. Townshend would go on to use the Gretsch in the studio to record tracks on albums such as Who's Next and Quadrophenia. Guitars: Fender Telecaster Butterscotch, Sunburst, Blonde, Natural White. Other finishes: Fender Stratocaster Black, White, Sunburst, Turquoise Green, Candy Apple Red, Duesenberg Double Cat 6 Sunburst, Rickenbacker 330 Gitglo used on the song The Long Run, and Rocky Mountain Way, 1959 Gibson Les Paul that was given sold to Led Zeppelin guitarist Jimmy Page in April 1969, Gibson Les Paul Custom Ebony and Sunburst, Gibson Les Paul Supreme Sunburst used on the song Get Over It to his playing slide guitar, Gibson ES 335 Sunburst, Z-Midas Custom Deluxe guitar used in concert on Farewell Concert Tour, Music Man guitars various finishes used in the Long Road Out of Eden Tour, Gretsch Country Club models Candy Apple Red and White, various model Carvin and Fernandez guitars, Takamine and Guild acoustic guitars, Ebenezer Joe Satriani model with humbucking pickups, silver, red etc. Carvin DC4, CT6, CT4, CS4, other various models Z, amplifiers Fender Drive Z, Carvin, Vox, third power amplification, Marshall 50-watt Plexi, other instruments. Discography. Filmography, see also, list of artists who reached number 1 on the U.S. mainstream rock chart, additional reading, Walsh, Joe. Look What I Did. And Then Some, Hal Leonard Corporation. ISBN 978-0793544714, Lemko, Steve. Joe and Me. CreateSpace Independent Publishing Platform. ISBN 978-1463612,276, references. External links, official website, Joe Walsh at AllMusic, Joe Walsh at the Internet Movie Database, Joe Walsh at DMOZ.